Well, good noon to everyone. Here we are at part 4 of our Friday Forums series. And with no opponent, this is going to be much more of a forum that features one-on-one discussion. We're pleased to have Newtown delegation member and 112th District Republican State Rep JP Sredzinski with us. JP, welcome. As we briefly discussed before we went live, we want to tell you that once again, editor Nancy Crevier is going to pose questions. You'll have approximately 3 minutes. We're going to time you. You'll have to respond to that question. And if any follow-up question happens to develop in the course of your answer that Nancy wants to pose to you, we'll give you an additional 2 minutes to respond to the follow-up. 30 seconds before the end of the answer, you'll see this 30-second warning placard. And then when the time is up, you'll see the stop. And that'll also signal Nancy to move on to the next question. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for everyone who's watching. And if you are not able to view us live, thanks for tuning into the Newtown B YouTube channel where we have archived this and all of our former Friday forums. So at this point, I just want to turn the program over to Newtown B editor Nancy Crevier. And thanks, Nancy. Here you go.
All right. Thank you so much again, Representative Sredzinski, for being with us today, and thank you to the viewers. Let's jump right into the questions. The first one that we have for you today, you expressed concerns around absentee balloting as the August 11th primary drew near. So how are you feeling about absentee balloting as the November 3rd election closes in?
Thank you for the question. And I also just want to, first off, thank you to the B for hosting this event. And even though I do not have an opponent, I think it's important to have me come on and express my views. And because the people that live in the 112th need to understand that they are represented, and they are represented by me. And so I think it's important that we have these conversations. To answer your question, yes, I expressed concern because of some of the issues that came up with the absentee emails, the absentee mailing that went out. We've seen, even in the general balloting, we have seen mistakes in addressing. We have seen mistakes in the way that these ballots have been offered to people. And so I think it's important that we really take a close look at what we are doing and how we're doing it. Now, I have no problem. In fact, I voted for the absentee ballot applications being mailed out. However, I think that we need to make sure that our ballots are accurate, that they are done in the right way. For example, I work from the town of Stratford, and we received in the town of Stratford, several people, hundreds of people received ballots that had return addresses for the town of Stafford. So we need to make sure that we're accurate, and we are accurate when it comes to our votes being counted. And that's what matters most to me.
You said it's important to have them done in the right way. What does the right way look like to you?
So the right way is one person, one vote. So if you are a voter in the state of Connecticut, your vote should be counted, but only your vote should be counted. And it should be really one person, one vote, and that should be it. We should not be concerned with several other, ballots. We should not be concerned with other people being involved. It should be one person, one vote, and we should make sure that our ballots are counted and they are accurate each and every time.
Thank you. Let's go on then. So what do you think has been your greatest accomplishment as our representative, and what will you be working to move forward in the next 2 years?
So I would say that working with Representative Belinsky, with Senator Wong, we have been able to secure and ensure Newtown's educational funding. And that is the biggest accomplishment that I have had moving forward. Monroe, along with that, we have both towns, Monroe and Newtown, have faced challenges to their educational funding, which we have fought back on significantly. And it's important that we receive the dollars that we send to Hartford in terms of taxes. So for me, it is most important to make sure that we get our return on investment. And Representative Belinsky, Senator Wong have both been very, very strong in that respect. And I look forward to continuing that moving forward.
Right. Are there any other efforts that you would like to see taken on that you could support that will help your constituents?
Sure. One of the things that recently has been an issue is the police accountability bill. I think that police accountability bill, which I voted against, went too far. And I think that we should be doing a better job of protecting our law enforcement. So one of the things I look forward to in 2021 is trying to repeal or try to make some changes to that bill so that it's more common sense and it applies better to our law enforcement community and is more supportive of our law enforcement community.
I'm hearing that maybe you think that the way that the bill went through is going to affect how police officers might respond or perhaps be afraid to respond. Is that one of your concerns? Is that what I'm hearing?
I wouldn't say that it's going to affect the way they respond because in the law enforcement community that I know, they're going to do their jobs. What this bill will do, though, is prevent our law enforcement community, or I should say it will prevent those men and women who are looking to get involved in law enforcement to possibly take that step and apply and go through that process, because we as a state have devalued them as law enforcement and have said, we are not going to support you as much as we have in the past. And I think that's a mistake. And I think that we need to be very clear about supporting our law enforcement. And so that's why I think it's important to change some of the bill and some of the law that was passed.
Do you think that there are areas where law enforcement can be improved?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that there are definitely areas, when it comes to training, when it comes to body cameras, for example. However, I think by and large, the communities of Monroe and Newtown are well served by their law enforcement, and they need to continue that. And they need to be supported in that, because when we call 911 for help, we need to know that we have qualified, ready, and trained law enforcement responding. And we have that now. The problem is that the state of Connecticut has made it so that these officers do not feel as supported as they need to be, and that's a shame.
All right. Thank you so much for answering my multi-part question there. Let's go on again to something a little more broad. What's the first step that you'll take to see that the looming deficit is addressed in a way that does not further burden taxpayers?
Well, that by itself is a huge question. We in the state of Connecticut need to really get our spending under control. We have major issues with our pensions. We have major issues with our debt, and we really need to make sure we get our spending under control. And that comes from working with the Appropriations Committee to make sure that we are spending within our means. And that's not an easy thing to do. I spent 2 years on appropriations. Representative Belinsky has been on appropriations for, I think, 8 years now. So he knows exactly what it takes to get this under control. And it's not an easy decision. There are no easy decisions on where to cut spending, but we really need to control our spending. We need to make sure that we are not further burdening the taxpayers of the state. We are one of the highest taxed states as it is. So really the answer to your question is we need to get our spending under control.
Do you have any thoughts so far as how that might, what that might look like? How, I mean, how do you get this kind of a huge deficit? How do you get spending under control without taxing?
Sure. So you have to take a look at literally line by line, look through the budget to see where we can go. One of the areas that we spend a lot of money on is the University of Connecticut. I'm a graduate of the University of Connecticut, so I appreciate the fact that we have spent and made that investment in that university. However, you know, we need to take a close look at spending at the university level, at the state university level, corrections. There are a lot of areas where we need to take a close look at where we're spending and how we can be doing better.
Okay. Thank you. So COVID, that's caused a lot of issues here in our state, across the nation for that matter. What advice would you have for the governor regarding COVID protocols going forward?
So it's a very good question. As my full-time job, I manage the 911 dispatch center for the town of Stratford. And we have had several hundreds of COVID cases here in the town. And we have changed the way we have functioned because of COVID. And since March, we have a complete different perspective on how we handle 911 calls. Every single caller, whether you're calling a domestic or you're calling in your car got broken into, or you're calling in a medical problem, we ask COVID questions for the safety of our officers. So I have been on the front lines of this since March, and it's been a real challenge. But I will tell you, the governor has done a good job. I will give him credit. He has done a good job of trying to mitigate this crisis. I will say that as far as advice for him, I would tell him that he needs to look at the data. He will need to look at the curve, as we call it, and the curve has been flattened significantly. And I think the only difference that the governor and I would have is that I would have allowed for fall football this year. The DPH has declared that it is too much contact. It's not safe enough. I feel like that, you know, between face masks and other type of protections, that the football players would have been safe to go forward and play. But other than that, the governor, I think, has done a good job, and I think he just needs to continue doing what he's doing. And you know, we'll get through this.
We're now in phase 3 finally, which does open up a lot more indoor dining, a little bit larger gatherings inside and out. Do you think we're in a comfortable spot to do that with winter coming?
You know, it all depends. It's day by day. I mean, it really is day by day. And as you know, this morning, we just heard that the president and his wife has contracted COVID. So, I mean, you know, you would think that we're, quote, out of the woods, but we're not out of the woods. You know, I mean, we're only out of the woods as far as our infection rates go. So, you know, I see it every day here where I work. And we need to make sure that we're very, very aggressive and very conscious about what's happening. At the same time, we need to also realize that, you know, life needs to move on. So we need to figure out what we need to do as far as protecting ourselves, but also returning to our lives and trying to just return to a normal sense of life. So I do think that the curve has been flattened, but we also need to be vigilant about the way we handle it.
Vaccinations are in the news a lot for a lot of different reasons. Primarily, you keep hearing about, you know, we're hopeful for a COVID vaccination, but there's been controversy at state level. So what's your position on vaccination requirements for all public school children?
So my take on that is I don't believe that we should be mandating vaccinations. We are in a fortunate position where we have, I think, 95+% of our population who is vaccinating. And that allows us to have that herd immunity will not require the other 5% to be vaccinated. So I don't feel like it is advantageous to force or mandate vaccinations to everyone in the school population, because we do have enough people that are voluntarily willing to do so.
What about the COVID vaccine, though? Should that be required once it's available?
Well, it's a hypothetical. I mean, if and when it becomes available, I think that we need to look to our doctors and our health officials to see what they recommend. And at that time, we would figure out what would be required and what would be recommended.
Okay. Are your constituents worried about health insurance, about health care? What do you hear from your constituents regarding availability of insurance, where it's going to go in the future?
I have to be honest, I am very fortunate to have a district that does not have that as a primary concern. I'm sure there are plenty of people in my district that, are concerned about health insurance, but that's not something that I receive a lot of information about. I do get a lot of information about unemployment insurance. I get a lot of information about, having to fund COVID expenses. But I have not had a lot of people who reach out to me about health insurance. But obviously it's a concern, and it's something that is out there. And I'm more than willing to work with those constituents that do need help on situations that do require health insurance.
Your district doesn't encompass only a small portion of Newtown compared to the 106th district, for instance. So how frequently do you hear from Newtown people?
I would say daily. I mean, I get emails every day from constituents, mostly from Monroe, like you said, because I represent all of Monroe and about 5,000 constituents in Newtown. But I hear from Newtown residents regularly, and it's the same concerns that I hear from people in Monroe. So, it's regardless of where you live. And I've always said this, you represent Newtown. You don't represent part of Newtown, because you represent all of Newtown, because no one in Newtown is going to sit there and say, well, you represent this part of Newtown, so this is why you need to be concerned. If you represent part of the town, you represent all of the town. And I've said that. And I've worked with First Selectman Rosenthal. I've worked with, Representative Belinsky, Senator Wong, Representative Ellie Brennan, Representative Carter before him. And we've always had a real unified team moving forward, because like I said, you can't represent part of the town. You represent all of the town, regardless.
Okay, you did mention that you don't hear a lot from people concerned about so much about the healthcare issues, health insurance, but that you are hearing a lot of concerns about COVID, and that's not surprising. Unemployment, those kinds of problems. What other kinds of things are people bringing to your attention? What are the other concerns?
Other concerns that I get are involving the economy. I have a lot of small business owners in my community that reach out, and they are very concerned about our economy. And these are small business owners that, are, I don't want to say living paycheck to paycheck, but they are people that are not wealthy. They are people that are running their businesses. And when a pandemic hits and they lose, weekly revenue, that's a huge concern for them. And so they're concerned about what our economy is doing, what our economy is going to do moving forward, what our tax structure is going to be. And we just need to make sure that as a state that we're working to make sure that we can, guarantee or at least give them the best opportunity possible so that they have a successful business moving forward. And not just for them, but for their employees as well.
Is the state giving small businesses enough attention, enough financial aid at this point?
Absolutely not. No. I mean, when you look at what they've done, when the state has done in the past just 2 years, increasing the minimum wage, increasing taxes on small businesses, it's just been a disaster. And we have done so poorly in supporting our small businesses. And this is all pre-pandemic stuff. This wasn't, since COVID has happened. It's just that we have not, as a state, done a good job in supporting our small businesses or any of our businesses, to be honest with you.
That kind of leads me into another question about, Connecticut is often viewed as a little bit a lot business unfriendly. And what can you do about that as our representative? How are you working with everybody?
Well, I vote no a lot. That's one thing, but not to be snarky. But to be honest with you, what we can be doing is we can be listening to our small businesses. We can be listening to those people on the ground that are doing the work. And I understand that there are people out there that are hurting. There are people out there that will benefit from the minimum wage increase. But there's also a lot of small businesses that are going to be hurting from a minimum wage increase. There's going to be a lot of businesses that are hurting from some of the increases in taxes and some of the regulations. One bill that's always talked about at the legislature is the predictive schedule bill. The predictive schedule bill basically says, well, if you're going to possibly bring someone in for a certain amount of time, that you need to pay them ahead of time, or you need to schedule them so that they're paid ahead of time. And that just hurts our small businesses. We need to do a better job of listening. All we need to do is listen to these small businesses and realize what it is that they're facing every day. And that's what we really need to be doing as a state.
Thank you. That was one of the big questions that we had. Let's talk a little bit about how actions and inactions at the national level affect us locally. Do you see that?
Absolutely. As a state representative, it's been very challenging to see what's going on at the federal level. And I gotta be honest with you, it's just one of those things where you just kind of sit back, you watch what happens, you try to reach out when it's appropriate. But I gotta be honest with you, my congressperson is Jim Hines. I reach out to his office, I never hear back. I don't hear back from him. So I just feel that there is such a strong disconnect from the federal level to the state level that it's almost it's not worth getting into, because you just don't hear back. You don't have the impact that you need to have. And when I talk to people, about this election coming up, and I tell them, listen, your vote really matters. And they say, oh, come on, what does my vote really matter? We live in a blue state, Trump's not going to win, Biden's going to win, and what difference does it make? And I say, your vote matters when it comes to your state legislature. When you talk about Senator Wong's race, you talk about Representative Belinsky's race, you talk about, well, my race, I'm not opposed, but you talk about these races. These are the races that matter. And these are the people, me, I'm the one that's going to respond to you when you call, when you email. You might not get a response from your congressperson. You're certainly not going to get a response from your president, but you're going to get a response from me, because I represent around 28,000 people, and each of those people matter to me. And so I tell people all the time, your vote does significantly matter, especially in Monroe and Newtown.
Great. Yeah, I'm very surprised to hear that people today think that their vote doesn't matter, because like you said, especially when you get to the local level, it can make a great difference.
It certainly can.
Yeah. Another thing that comes up is, how easy is it to reach across the aisle, as they like to say? Can you give examples of how you've worked with Democrats in legislation that's beneficial to all of the state's residents? How are you working with the Democrats, or how easy is that?
I gotta be honest with you. If you watch the news, you would think that it's impossible, that Democrats and Republicans, all they do is yell at each other. But in Hartford, I have a lot of relationships across the other side of the aisle. I mean, there are a lot of people that I get along with. One of my best friends in the legislature is Representative Joe Varengia. and he's the chair of the Public Safety Committee. I'm the ranking member. So we have a great relationship, and we work really well together. I have a great relationship with Representative Bresco, Representative Arconti. I mean, I can go down the list of the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And it really just becomes a matter of what you want to do and the respect. And that building is really based on respect. And I've seen cases in the past. And I'll give you an instance from a few years ago. Governor Malloy at the time had cut the funding for the Governor Horse Guard. And he had cut the funding to zero. And we had been fighting for weeks to try to get that restored. Representative Belinsky saw Senator Beth Bai, who is now the Commissioner of Early Childhood Education. And he saw her in the hallway, and he went up to her and he explained to her how important the Governor Horse Guard was to Newtown. And she restored the funding on the spot. Restored the funding on the spot. And I'll give you the example that you asked for, because I want to make sure I answer your question. 2 years ago, I worked with Representative Staffstrom, who is the chair of Judiciary. And we passed a bill that created a confidentiality for first responders when it comes to their mental health. So basically, what this bill did was, 3 years ago, if you had a first responder and he or she had an issue or had a struggle with something, a bad call they went on, and they talked to their fellow firefighter or they talked to their fellow police officer, and they went up to them and said, "Listen, I had a real bad time with this call," that firefighter or policeman would not have any restriction on their confidentiality. They could go tell the chief, they could go tell another person. We passed a law that allowed for that confidentiality. And we got that done in order to promote mental wellness for our first responders. And that bill was passed by the Judiciary Committee unanimously. It was passed by the House unanimously, and then it was passed by the Senate unanimously. So that's just one example of me being able to get stuff done across the aisle.
Great.
Excuse me, Nancy, if there's no follow-up, we'll go to the last question. We're approaching the 30-minute mark.
Well, this one's kind of a softball probably for you, but what would you say is your greatest strength as a representative? Why should people vote for you?
Well, softball maybe, but that means I got to talk about myself. I think that it's just my work ethic, and I really do strive to represent the residents of Monroe and Newtown, regardless of where they live, because I really want to make sure that they have a voice in Hartford. And I pride myself on answering emails, on answering Facebook messages, on answering Instagram messages, on answering phone calls. I want people that live in my district to know that they have someone in me that is willing to get back to them and really be what we're supposed to be, which is a representative of the people. And whether we agree or disagree, there's been plenty of emails that I've gotten back to people, and I'm like, I think that you're wrong on this. I disagree with you, but I want them to know that I'm there for them, and that even though we may disagree, I'm going to respond and I'm going to get back to them.
Right. So I guess this kind of wraps up today's Friday forum, right, John?
Yes, thank you, Editor Nancy Crevier and 112th District GOP Representative JP Sredzinski, who is running unopposed, which gave us the opportunity to have a much different Friday forum today, not only getting in a lot more questions, but a lot more of a relaxed and informative discussion. Thank you both for playing a role in that as well. We do want to let folks know that if they missed missed any or all of the Facebook live session, they can simply, within about an hour or so, early Friday afternoon, go to the YouTube's Facebook channel to replay this or any of the other prior Friday forums with the 28th Senate District, the 2nd House District, and the 106th House District. And we do want to let folks know, as a little teaser, that we will be coming to you with at least one more Friday forum involving election business. We hope to bring in some voting officials to talk about and remind folks in town all the important information they're going to need to know if they're planning to vote live on election day, and probably some follow-up reminders as we move closer toward election day about things that are happening with absentee and mail-in voting. We also do want to remind you that Monday night at 7 p.m., the Newtown Bee has been asked to facilitate a forum that will hopefully answer a lot of questions involving the proposal to add a housing component to the Fairfield Hills master plan. So we hope folks can tune in to Facebook Live or our YouTube channel if they're interested in following up for that. Anyone with questions can submit them up to noontime this coming Monday for consideration to be included in that discussion, which will include a couple of developers who may be playing a role in possibly doing some residential conversion if, in the event, the election day referendum permits by vote the opportunity for adding that housing component to the master plan of Fairfield Hills. So with that, I will say thank you so much to everyone for watching, and thank you, Editor Nancy Crevier and JP Sredzinski, for participating today. And we'll see you at our next Friday forum.
Thank you, John.